welcome to the Two Real Cinema Club. I'm James Rosica.
And I'm Andres Lorente. Every week on the Two Real Cinema Club, we watch a couple of films, and one is usually old and one is new, and we make some comparisons and draw some distinctions between the two. This year we have Christmas on our minds and in our ears and in our hearts.
And on our screens.
And on our screens. We'll be watching, we watched already, Your Christmas or Mine. I can't call it an instant classic, but it's on Netflix.
It exists.
2022, where are we at? It's a film, a wonderful romantic sort of comedy kind of thing for the season. And then we compare that with the absolute classic, It's a Wonderful Life, directed by Frank Capra and starring Jimmy Stewart. And that dates to 1946.
1946.
So I'll turn it over to Jimmy. Yeah, go.
So we should do the socials before we start talking about the film. So as always, provided Twitter is still working by the time that this podcast goes out, you can find us on Two Real Cine Club at twitter.com. We're on Instagram, Two Real Cinema Club at instagram.com. We have a blog, tworealcinemaclub.com. So you can come there. It's probably the best place to leave us a message. Or you can email us, tworealcinemaclub at gmail.com. If you enjoy the show, or if you don't, tell your friends. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, on Spotify, or wherever else you get your podcasts. And we also stick them up on YouTube as well. So there's no excuse. Leave us a review if you can. It makes a big change, big difference to us. Please let people know. So it's Christmas time. We have both watched the new Amazon backed Christmas movie here in the UK. Tell me about it.
I'm hoping, I assume I watched the same film because I thought it was on Netflix, but you're right. It was Amazon, wasn't it?
It's Amazon in this country. It's been widely publicized in this country. It's been on the sides of all the buses here. It's been really heavily pushed.
Did you pay for it? Did you have to give money to see this film? Or?
I'm happy to say it came down the pipe for free.
Okay.
Yeah, it's part of Amazon Prime, so you don't need to pay anything extra.
Okay, I think
so. They're advertising it as a reason to sign up to Amazon Prime, because not only do you get your parcels delivered, but you get to see Your Christmas or Mine for free.
Okay. I think that was the case for us too. I think we do have an Amazon Prime membership in the family, so it just cost the subscription of Prime. I feel like this was payback for Blonde. I insisted that we watch Blonde a while back, and I think I apologized to you for that. But this is payback a little bit. It's an hour and 35 minutes, so I still owe you like an hour and 15 minutes of your life. But, whew, I lost a little bit of mine. This is directed by Jim O'Hanlon, who, according to IMDb, has directed 268 episodes of Coronation Street.
So that is, if you don't know, that is the biggest soap opera in the UK. It's absolutely enormous. Yeah, that is a lot of episodes.
I watched a little bit when I was in England, but really not many episodes, maybe a handful. And I didn't see that he had directed any of the ones that I saw. But that's a lot. I mean, that would be. Is it weekly?
Oh, I think it's like 5 shows a week, something like that. I think they make a lot.
Okay. So they're
that's many months worth.
Okay,
more than that.
That's I think. Wow. So he's the director, and it was written and created. I was really interested by that credit because I usually think of that as a TV credit. When someone's creating a show, we don't really talk about people creating a movie, but it was written and created by Tom Perry, who's an actor and a writer, and it was an interesting credit. Did you notice that as well?
I didn't spot that. I did spot that he's a UK comic, so he's kind of come up through the stand-up scene.
Okay.
And he's not somebody that I know, and it's a long time since I've done any stand-up.
Yeah.
But that's been his route in, and I think he has done other TV writing, but it's largely he's a comedian.
Okay, and I had recognized on IMDb for Tom Perry. He looked familiar, and I think he's on one episode of Ted Lasso, so I remembered that face from Ted Lasso. Yeah, so he's probably a little bit familiar to American audiences as a result. And it's interesting that you mentioned that he's a stand-up comic, because there are a couple things about this film that make me feel like he was writing stuff for comics to sort of bring to life. Asa Butterfield plays, I guess he's Hubert James Hughes, but he goes by James in the film. The other is her name is Haley Taylor, plays Cora Kirk. Is that? No, Cora Kirk. I'm sorry. Cora Kirk plays Haley Taylor.
Cora Kirk.
Also features Alex Jennings and David Bradley and Harriet Walter, some familiar faces from, I guess, British film and television.
Yeah. I see some stalwarts here, aren't there?
Yeah. It takes place it starts sort of in London, Marylebone Station, and ends up in the English countryside. And Hubert James, or just James Hughes, and Haley they're romantically involved. They seem to they've only been together, it seems like a couple of months, but they're both headed off for sort of a holiday break at their respective houses. Very much in love, it seems, but they get a little bit confused and they sort of end up on the wrong trains, or there's some confusion. They want to be on the wrong trains because they're each sort of trying to go to each other's home to surprise one another, but as a result, they end up going to each other's homes for Christmas holiday, somewhat by accident. And
I was going to say that I watched this film with the whole family, and the children asked me, having been forced to sit through some not so great films lately, they asked me, "What's it about? Is it any good?"
Yeah.
And when I explained that setup, that it's boyfriend and girlfriend, and he wants to sneak onto her train to surprise her at Christmas, and she sneaks onto his train to surprise him at Christmas, so they both go to each other's houses.
Yeah.
And my children thought that was a great idea. And I think this it's not a meet cute, it's like a train cute or whatever at the start of the film. Yeah, it's a great high concept, cute idea. I think it's good. And those first sort of 10 minutes are actually, I know we're going to complain about this film quite a lot, but those first 10 minutes are actually, fairly cute and effective. And it's a nice setup that I think really works.
I agree. I think it's an endearing setup. But immediately I'm thinking, well, why? You're on the right train, you think, to surprise your partner, but they don't really go looking for one another on each other's train. And it's, I guess the idea is that they want to surprise the partner when they get to their town and end up getting off the same train that the other one was on. But we know it's not going to be a surprise for the audience. So it's really, and then they stretch it out a little bit. Like James looks back and there's a woman wearing exactly what Haley was wearing on the train. So he's really anxious to surprise her when he gets to town, and it ends up being the wrong woman. So I think they go a little bit far to make it all happen. But yes, it is a meet cute of sorts, or a train cute. I like that.
Incidentally, that woman who was wearing the same outfit as Haley, who he very briefly hugs, and then she says, "Oh, what's your story?"
Yeah.
That is Lizzie Roper, who is like a UK comedian who I used to gig with
really?
20 years ago. Yeah, she is lovely. And she had like a long period in the West End when she was in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Oh, really?
So it's nice to see her turn up for what I'm sure was like a 2-hour shoot or something. Just quickly turn up, put the hat on, do a gag, Lizzie, thanks.
Just a cameo.
But nice to see her. I haven't seen her for a long time.
I think James is walking away. I think she does proposition him in quite a suggestive way as he's walking on. So she's up for it. But
that's the Lizzie I know. Yeah.
Oh, nice. Haley conveniently leaves her phone on a train, and there's really no signal. I think she arrives in a town called Kemble. Is it Kemble?
Yeah, something like that, isn't it? Yeah, something very made up sounding.
Which is close to James's home. I think we need to do a future popcorn counter. I have this theory of how cell phones have either like irreparably damaged films or changed them forever. And this is just a very convenient thing. You have to, but in this day and age, you have to go out of your way to like losing a cell phone in order to put someone just in this position of vulnerability where they can't contact anyone. Because in this day and age, you can contact anyone from anywhere. So I think the antagonist early on is just this confusion of missing their trains and being put in a situation, sort of fish out of water for both of them. And we start to learn a little bit about each of their lives without them in their home environment. So James is rich, wealthy, lives in basically a castle in the Gloucester countryside. So that's where, but he ends up in Haley's neighborhood, sort of a modest neighborhood in Macclesfield. That is a real town, I believe, in England.
That is a real place, yeah, absolutely.
So he ends up with her very working class family. Her family's house is just super over the top decorated for the holidays, as opposed to James's castle, where Haley arrives, and it's very quiet. There's just, I think she's sort of like a housekeeper, Fiona, who is there and greets her, and Fiona's played by Harriet Walter. Very empty place, and James's father is Hubert James Humphrey, I think he's just Hubert Hughes. That's it. but he was what do you decide? He's like a lord of Gloucester.
Lord, is it Earl of Gloucester? Did you say? I thought it was Lord
Yeah.
Gloucester, something like that. But I think you said Earl of Gloucester might be more
Definitely
accurate.
in a titled position, I suppose.
Yeah.
These two towns, I looked on the map, sort of, probably about almost 200 kilometers apart from one another. But sometime in this film, it is possible, or it seems to be possible, to drive either a food truck or farm equipment through a winter storm to get between them. So there is some distance between these places, but it sort of shrinks in the third act when they
it's cinema geography, isn't it?
Yes. So they end up in each other's houses. That's sort of the whole first act, is how they end up sort of getting more and more entrenched in the other's house for the holidays. There's a big storm running through the country, so all the trains are down, and then you miss cabs and whatnot, and it's just this series of events of people trying to get onto a train and get back to their right house, but they're both stranded at each other's house. And it's kind of interesting that her family really takes James in immediately, whereas it takes a lot longer for Haley to endear herself to James's father. There's very little explanation of who James is with Haley's family at first. But they seem to be very welcoming. He sort of meets her little brothers first, and they play a little trick on him, and I don't know, they trick him for £5 each or something like that. But lo and behold, everyone's missed their last train. They've got to stay with each other's families, and that's sort of the getting them into the this point where they just have to become family with one another's kin.
The way the boys trick him out of the money is another one of those anachronisms, isn't it? Because the reason he gives them the money is because he's looking for the house, like the road where Haley lives.
Yeah.
And again, anybody who has a smartphone on their pocket is never lost anywhere in the world. He has GPS for everything on the earth in his pocket right there. He doesn't need to pay two boys £5 each depending on what road he's on.
And he's on the very road where she lives anyway. Let's see. You're definitely, it's like a clash of two cultures. They come from different worlds. The manners of speech, the accents sort of define characters a little bit, and certainly the James's father. I don't really think he has a job. He's just like a lord or an earl or whatnot. He was a military man.
What do those guys do? Yeah,
he's just earling or lording.
Earling, yeah.
But he was obviously in the military. There's this rich military history in his family, but James wants to be an actor, and he's actually he tells Haley's family that he's a friend of Haley's from drama school, and that's why he's there to sort of visit her. He doesn't say that he's the boyfriend just right away. In fact, there are some cliches there where he pretends to be gay, so he's not passing himself off or not revealing himself immediately as her boyfriend. So it turns out that neither partner's really told their families about the other, and all these secrets sort of get revealed by living their partner's lives. That's kind of a nice play, is that they're both fishes out of water in each other's homes. She's in this very wealthy world because James's father is so well positioned in life. He thinks that Haley's father was a soldier. That's what she tells him, and that James's father thinks that Haley's a soldier because he's under the impression that James is in some sort of military school. So there's this big lie that James is telling his father and his family about, that he's not in drama school, whereas that's exactly where they met. And James learns things about Haley too. That she did magic as a youth. They didn't know. He didn't know that was what her background was before drama school. And then there's this moment where they're staying in each other's rooms. Of course, James gets put up in her room, and she gets put up, which are very different. She gets put up in his room, which is this just castle-like atmosphere, and she has a very modest room in her house. So then, by the middle of the film, James's father kind of learns that the rabbit comes out of the hat or whatnot, that Haley's at Guildhall. She's learning drama, and that's where James is too. But they basically, again, the next day, I think there's another, I think, Jimmy, you mentioned something about this in your notes on the show, is that she leaves the house for a little while, but then all the trains are canceled. And exactly the same thing sort of happens with James down at her house. So all the trains are canceled, and they have to stay yet another night in each other's homes. And this is go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's that idea for kind of low budget filmmaking, isn't it? Where you get the characters and you put them all in like a little sort of like a confined space, and you get them to play it out, and it's like a bottle sort of scenario, isn't it? And here we've got two bottles.
Two bottles, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So she's in a bottle and he's in a bottle. But the question is, how many times can you leave a house? Because characters just keep leaving the house and then having to come back. There's snow. Oh, let's storm out the house again. Oh no, there was more snow. I'm going to storm out the house again. Oh no, there's more snow. You can only really kind of play that card so many times. And, they play it 2 or 3 times, as many times as you can get away with, I think, in this film.
Yeah, and it's interesting to hear that that the writer was a stand-up comic, because I mentioned to you earlier that there's some scenes that feel like they're just written for comics or comic actors to do some vamping. It's not like rich dialogue and really intense drama at any point. It's much more, actors given a chance to just do their thing on screen. So then there's the classic montage. Oh boy, Cliche Squad is going to have a lot of work to do. James does spa time with the ladies of Haley's family and really becomes really one of the girls to a certain extent. I think this is so stereotypical, but they're under the impression that he's the gay best friend or something like that. Meanwhile, in the same kind of montage, it's like a double montage, isn't it? It's a lot of double bottled up characters, double montages. Haley sets up a Christmas tree and decorations in this mansion that hasn't been decorated for Christmas for years because James's mother has died, and there's this sadness that has been gripping the house ever since. Until a dog gets shot. I think that was great. Act 2 curtain, basically Peanut, who is James's dog, gets shot by a gun-toting neighbor played by David Bradley. And that's when Haley's been explicitly told by Fiona, don't let the dog out. But of course the dog gets out and gets shot kind of by accident, by humorous accident. And then we learn sort of in this sort of later going of the film that Haley actually has a fiancé named Steve. This guy is ripped. He's got great muscles. The younger brothers love him. The family loves him. So James is just confused and very angry all at once because she's got a boyfriend that she didn't tell him about.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Haley's sort of getting deeper into James's life and into his mother's things. Apparently, James and his mother had this connection of acting and being artists, and he never really connected to his father, who was more of a military background, so he's trying to sort of satisfy his father's dreams for him, but his mother's dreams were really to have weddings at this beautiful, I keep calling it a castle, but this beautiful country home, have concerts on the property, and Haley's sort of finding out about his mother and that relationship by going through all these things in the house where, again, forbidden rooms where she's not allowed to go. But she also says, look, I've broken up with Steve. And then at the same time, she tells James that, like, Steve is sort of playing that they're still together, but they're not. And it's about the same time where, I like this. I did like this line. It's pretty bad. But James tells her family, I'm not gay. I'm just a really good actor. One of the great bits in the film, I thought. So on learning that Haley has Steve earlier, James sort of leaves the house again. You're right. There's a lot of leaving of houses. Both characters are kind of sad. And sort of a lot of the past comes out. There's the Earl never really saw James act. So his father really never supported him in that endeavor. And that James's father spends every Christmas Eve at the dead mother's grave, and that's, I think, why he was gone when the dog got shot. Haley, I think she tries to leave again. Boy, there's a lot of leaving. You're right, Jimmy. She tries to leave.
It's like the only action you can have, isn't it? I'm stuck in this house, so I'll leave. That's the thing I can do. Let's do it again. Do it again.
That's right. You can leave a location, but you can never go to another location because there is no other location.
we couldn't pay for any others.
Yeah. It's great. I mean, it's economical. I got to say that. But she leaves. The storm sort of gets rough again, and she's forgotten her inhaler. She's asthmatic. And the Earl needs to go out and fetch her. And he knows that she's not a soldier at this point because soldiers don't use inhalers or something like that. They would never accept someone to,
probably, actually.
to do her thing because she's got asthma. Peanut has recovered. He helps to find her, even though he's been shot. Fortunately, he's not been killed. There's some question for a little while because he disappears, but he comes back with a little bandage on his head.
Head bandage and no grudge, yeah.
And then James has Haley's family. Oh, that's right. He's using the landline, right? So he forgets a phone at one point too, that's right. He leaves. He's using Haley's family's landline because he's forgotten his cell phone. So there's another cell phone again. So this is why this film is sort of proving my theory a little bit. So that he has to go back to her family's house, and she at the same time as she's going back to him. So they're really, or his house. So they're sort of having these parallel experiences as well. We ultimately learn that James lost his mother on Christmas Eve, so that's it makes the holiday extra difficult for him. And they kind of each go in the opposite direction again via very strange transportation is what I wrote down. Because her family has a food truck. Jim, you're going to talk about the Cliche Squad for that too, I think.
Yeah, oh my goodness.
They're in a food truck going, I can't remember the directions exactly, going towards his castle, basically. And James is along for the ride. And then there's a trailer that is at the castle. It's got a tractor and a trailer combo that turns out James's grandfather lives on the property. He's the one who shot Peanut by accident. And the trailer doesn't make it, but the ice cream truck and the whole family sort of arrive at the wonderful countryside mansion of James's family, and they finally reunite. Especially James and Haley get back together in the ice cream truck, and all is sort of forgiven and explained, and they're very much in love. And of course, I don't know how they did this, but that last shot shows you that the tractor trailer did make the 200-kilometer ride back down, even though it wasn't working before, and the ice cream truck too, in time to have basically it looked like Christmas dinner at Haley's family's house with everyone together, everyone really getting along and living happily ever after.
Big sigh of relief.
That was hard. I didn't feel like I did a very good job because that was really hard for me.
Do you mean hard like painful?
No. I mean, I was looking for the important things in the film, and I just feel like there wasn't a whole
that's
lot
where you went wrong,
I think
right?
Yeah. I think it's Christmas candy. You're supposed to just enjoy it. And there were some things that I really thought were clever, and I smiled a little bit. I was just very glad that it was an hour and 35 minutes. It was definitely the right length. It didn't need to be any longer than that.
Yeah.
And I liked some of those moments of coming to know each other by being apart from one another. I'm sure this has been done in films before, but I think that was the best part, is that they're each kind of experiencing the other's life and learning things that they didn't know. Because my impression was they had only been together for a couple of months, really. I mean, maybe they'd started school together that fall, and then by Christmas they were really, really into each other. So they didn't feel like they were like long-term romantic partners. It felt kind of fresh, which made it nice. And then it was kind of interesting that they'd learned about each other by being alone with the other's family. So I liked that. And the ruse to get them to each other's place, it makes sense. It's not believable, but it makes sense. Yeah, it's cute.
I mean, it's another of the plot points which is undermined by having a mobile phone. I can't imagine two young people these days dating for a couple of months without doing a little bit of cyber stalking. Yeah, and at least you would check out each other's Instagram or something. It would be pretty difficult to keep your engagement or the fact that you are a peer of the realm secret completely. Yeah. I agree that there were some elements that I enjoyed in this film. There were quite a few laughs. There was a scene where they're waiting at the train station and the electronic board gradually cancels every train one by one. My children really guffawed at that because that's their life every morning when they go to school. And when they're out driving the ice cream van, and like the dad says, don't worry, we'll be fine, I've modified the van, and he's just strapped like a tea tray to the front of it, which falls off immediately. That's right. It's good fun gags. Yeah. And of the characters, I quite enjoyed the character of the flirty aunt, which is played by Natalie Gamidi, who I think is also like a UK soap actor. Yeah. I think she was in Strictly Come Dancing in this country a few years ago as well. And that's
Haley's aunt, to be clear.
That's right, Haley's aunt. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think there are a few underexplored characters in this film. When Haley makes this slightly inexplicable decision that she's she's been told that the study is out of bounds, so she decides to go into the study and take all the Christmas decorations out and strew them all over the house. I think she's supposed to be a bit drunk because she and the housekeeper are like drinking wine, aren't they, first thing in the morning?
That's right.
And this notion of the housekeeper who's sort of very quiet and sensible, but actually completely drunk by 10 o'clock in the morning. Yeah. I think that's quite an amusing character, but utterly underexplored by the story. My kind of impression of this, I think. It's got that low-budget filmmaking trope, isn't it, of cramming all the characters together, and it felt like it needed to become a farce. So, like, there needed to be one discovery that will pile up on another discovery, on top of another, on top of another, so that that everyone would think that that James was gay, and then then the fiance would turn up, but then maybe the fiance actually is bisexual, and so then there's another layer of complication.
Yeah.
And then they just kind of keep piling them up on top of each other. And I think that's when it would work. But instead, the story kind of it politely resolves each issue in turn.
Mm-hmm.
So the thing it made me think of, it's a little bit like having a limited amount of RAM in your computer. So you can't open a new application until you've closed the old one. So each time a problem comes up, it just kind of it gets resolved and thrown away. So like things like with Steve, the ripped fiance, he turns up and he's kind of he's this perfect suitor, the perfect husband, and then after James leaves, he apparently apologizes off screen and just disappears, doesn't appear for the rest of the film.
That's right.
The dog gets shot. Oh, it's dead. Oh, but no, it's not. It's all right. It's fine. There's a drunk housekeeper. It gets forgotten about. There's a flirty aunt. Well, we forget about her. The study is completely out of bounds, but oh no, we've forgiven you for that. The phone. Oh, I've lost it. Oh, but here's a landline, so it's no problem.
Yeah. Well,
James is gay. Oh no, but he's not. It's all right.
Yeah. So all the tension is gone because that's
absolutely, exactly. So each kind of problem is like crossed off just too soon. Yeah. Why not pile them all up on top of each other? It reminds me, like say, of like an old episode of Frasier, which used to do this really well. They get a whole bunch of problems and then just multiply them by each other. Yeah. To form this enormous farce where every little move has a big sort of worry behind it or high stakes. Yeah. Whereas here everything is resolved too easily, which I just thought that was like a pretty easy fix. And it's a shame that no one spotted that before they shot.
Yeah, well, I wonder, is this a film or is this just sort of like an extended television piece?
Yeah, that's just what it feels like, isn't it?
And I think that makes I think there's a big difference there, yeah, because I don't know what the release is like. Is it just Amazon Prime? I imagine this is not ever going to be in a theater.
No.
It just felt like a commodity kind of. They just made something, popped it up on Amazon. They'll make their money somehow. It's not. I mean, it couldn't have been super expensive to make. So I don't see it like becoming a holiday classic or anything like that. I don't think it doesn't have a lot of that piling up of problems because I don't think it's that kind of product. I think it's just kind of 2022 this Christmas, and it'll probably disappear. So it's kind of a throwaway.
It's a shame, isn't it? Because there are clearly some talented people involved. Yeah. But yeah, I agree. It's just not quite there. I have got one question for you. Do you think is there any part of this film that might possibly trouble the Cliche Squad?
Cliche Squad.
I know you have a list. My whole feeling, I think the Cliche Squad already works too hard. That's why I didn't want to mention anything. But yes, put the call.
I think the Cliche Squad are going to have to form like an entire new division. I think they're already recruiting staff. I did start making a list. I mean, you're exactly right.
Okay,
so,
let's bullet point it out. I would just...
Like this cliche of having this kind of this secret hidden wealth. Oh, actually, I live in a castle, but I never told you. This idea of having an ice cream van as the symbol of like working class grit and enterprise.
Yeah,
and I feel like I've seen that so many times. It's like, well, if you want,
is it ice cream though? Because I thought he had like turkeys and ducks and chickens. I thought he was just like a.
I think the idea is, it's in appearance, it's definitely an ice cream van, and it is plastered with adverts for ice creams on the inside. But I think the idea being, it's Christmas, so he's like, he's being plucky and working class and independent and enterprising.
He does sell a young kid.
He's selling frozen chickens.
Yeah. I think he sells a young kid some ice cream at the train station when he's waiting for.
Right, yeah.
Okay. God, yeah. All right. More.
This idea of I like that the secret perfect fiance. You know, like you go home and everything is perfect, and suddenly you're engaged. You know, the idea of this cold father who lost his wife and packed her things away. You know, it's so symbolic. And even this idea of this kind of this notion that you go to the countryside and the first person you meet is like some old bumpkin in a overcoat with a shotgun, because that's what people in the countryside are like. Yeah, you'll always meet one of them. The list kind of goes on and on, doesn't it?
It's a little bit of menace, though. That's what the countryside, the bumpkin with the shotgun is just that touch of menace. It's, it could be a nice character, but again, that's a character who is definitely underdeveloped and then is all of a sudden, it's James's grandfather, and he and his son don't get along.
Exactly.
His son lives in the mansion there, and he's, you feel like he's just living in a shack and hunting squirrels and things to survive. But
I hate to come down quite so hard. There is an interesting notion, actually, which is this film really understands that class, is what divides British society, rather than race. Because there are a number of actors of colour in this movie, and it's utterly not explored because the film recognises that class trumps race in your explanation of how UK society works. It doesn't really explore this notion of class particularly. And at the end, the posh people and the working class people get together for a nice cosy Christmas, and it's not really kind of explored. But it is notionally there as a kind of underlying theme. So they have, they've thought about that if they haven't been able to approach it properly.
It's a little bit undermined early on because when Haley first arrives at James's house, she's mistaken for someone applying to be the house cleaner or something like that, right? And Haley's mixed race or black, I think, and it's I think it sort of undermines that a little bit, but I guess they're trying to make it believable that they're not expecting her, number one, and that maybe she is applying for this job. But I think it was a housekeeper or a cook or something like that. I forget exactly.
Or cleaner or something like that. Although, like when the actual girl turns up to be the cleaner, she is white.
She's
isn't
white.
she?
Yes, yeah, yep.
And again, actually, I felt like that was you've introduced another little character there. Oh, couldn't we have couldn't she be part of the mix?
Yeah.
It feels like there's just like a long list of missed opportunities. It's like, there could have been another 3 or 4 drafts when you could have stitched all this together and it could have like somehow swirled into a fugue, everything kind of coming to a head. But maybe that wasn't the feel they wanted to go for.
And I think I would ask that of you exactly. Like, do you think that the intention at any time was to make this a work of art, a great picture, or were they just thinking holiday films are going to sell? We can get this on Amazon. We're going to stitch something together and push it that way.
I wonder if you are a TV director with 270 episodes behind you, you want your debut feature to really be special, I would say.
Yeah.
You've already got an idea of where to put the camera and what to say to actors.
Yeah.
I don't know. Wouldn't you say this is your experience? Whenever you make something, your original hope is that it might turn out to be Citizen Kane. I think surely everybody feels this. And I don't know whether it's just that they ran out of time or money or ingenuity, but it's a bit of a miss. Interesting that despite it being, really fairly weak, Amazon have presented this very strongly as their UK Christmas offering in this country.
Oh.
So it's been heavily promoted here.
Oh, you guys are lucky. A gift just for you from Amazon.
Thank you, Jeff Bezos. Right, let's have a break. We'll have some warming mulled wine and a mince pie, and we'll come back with a entirely different Christmas film, 1946's It's a Wonderful
So, Jimmy.
Yeah.
Our listener knows that we have some friends from the Israeli porn bot industry.
That guy's pretty consistent.
Yes. Listeners, you can say, when you say our listener, that means we're talking directly to one person, but we actually have listeners. So our regular listeners know about our relationship with the Israeli porn bots, and I thought I should reach out to them and thank them for their service, and also to see if they wanted to sponsor us. Anyone who's listened to the podcast knows we are looking for sponsors, so I did my due diligence and wrote to them. Now, we know that their ISP, is it an ISP? Internet Service Provider, something like that. Yeah, it's related to an Israeli account, and that's why we call them the Israeli porn bots. But they could be contacting us from anywhere, right? I mean, like ISPs these days.
Anywhere outside of the official legal jurisdiction of the United States.
Yes, yes. Wherever they're from, they write with kind of an artificial intelligence accent, if you know what I'm talking about. So I'm gonna end up reading their letter back, their response.
Oh, great!
But it's gonna sound a little stilted for sure. There have been a lot of articles about AI getting so much better, but the writing's not good.
For these guys.
Exactly. So bear with me as I read their reply. But I really wanted to bring you and our listeners their message in their own words. So here you go. So remember, this is artificial intelligence. Dear Mr. Tutu Real Podcaster, thank you for stretching out to us currently. Yes, we are interested in forging sponsorship with you handsome sexual identifying gentlemen. From our collections, we know you as Hot for Teacher, and we have various scholastic and extracurricular opportunities for great pooders such as yourselves. So I think that the intelligence is amazing because we've talked about Hot for Teacher far too many times.
Far too many times. Yeah, they've picked up on that.
They're definitely listening in. Products and services now coming to live on Worldly Wide Web are feature more realistic sounds and experiences, private video chat rooms with one-on-one bot access, bot double trouble rooms. I don't know what that is. Your bot buddy therapy sessions.
Oh my God.
Infinite expanse interactive video and photo galleries. Virtual reality, that's VR, right? Virtual reality.
Yeah, right.
Bot exploration and discovery safe space. Digital phone sex version 5.0 and online watercolor painting classes. Go figure.
These guys are really into their technology.
Jeez, they're good. They're good. Full service. In answer to your intense curiosity, it's true I have been writing them a lot, an awful lot. We want to make...
Good to make contact with your friends, isn't it? Yeah.
We want to make you notice that we are real active peoples. As we like to communication, Israeli porn bots equal to is really good porn bots. I think that's like a tagline for them or like one of their mottos.
That's like an AI generated pun. That's amazing.
It's great, isn't it? I love these guys.
That's good.
I love the Israeli porn bots. We are not only most exclusive lovers, but most inclusive one too. It says brining, but I think it's bringing our binary and non-binary experience to extraordinary love service. I thought that was good.
Yeah.
This is definitely one of their like taglines or mottos, I guess. It says Israeli porn bots for the special relationship in all of us. Visit with us at israelpornbot.sex. So that's the website that they want you to use.
That's a catchy URL, isn't it? That's catchy.
I'm glad they got the .sex thing. That's good. Israelpornbot.sex. Then I loved this at the end. Happy Hanukkah, Podcasters. Or if you celebrate ecstasy of live-born Christ, I think that's Christmas, right? Then marry that too, and all other holidays joyous. It's a lovely letter. So.
That is a lovely letter. Google Translate is getting really good now, isn't it?
Yes, and the artificial intelligence is getting very good. So I'll keep this this contact open, and we'll continue to contact them and see if we can develop that special relationship.
My only slight worry is that they are going to start dictating what films we review. We are back from our brief trip to Tel Aviv. Now back to the US. We're going to talk about It's a Wonderful Life, 1946, Frank Capra film. Now, I had seen this once before, I think, when I was a teenager, and I was kind of aware that it was a Christmas classic, and I didn't particularly like it at the time. I remember being a bit nonplussed.
Yeah.
Enjoyed it an awful lot more this time. How many times do you think you've seen this film?
Oof. Okay, well, that's a great question that I can't really answer because, like you, I saw it in bits and pieces because it's always on at Christmas. So I'd probably seen parts of it 20 or 30 times at least.
Whoa!
And never sat down. But then I was probably early 20s when I sat down and watched the full film and loved it from the very first time. And then it sort of became a Christmas tradition in our family to this, it's just always on, so it's easy to watch. So I'm going to say that I've seen the full film probably around 20 times. But
Wow. Okay. Wow. God, that's 10 times as many times as I have. So I've seen it all the way through twice now.
Yeah.
My second viewing. So it originally started life as a short story.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, a bit of a long, complicated genesis of this movie. So in November 1939, it was published by Philip Van Doren Stern. So he was most famous as a U.S. Civil War historian. He spent quite a long time writing this short story, 4,000 words, called The Greatest Gift. He tried to find a publisher for it and couldn't. So in the end, he self-published. He printed up 200 copies of this short story and he sent it out with Christmas cards to friends and family. Yep. You can read the story online now, actually. It's easily available. It's on the Tor website, who are kind of fantasy publishers. So you can read it online. It's a very short, easy to read little short story with quite a lot in common with the film, but also quite a lot that is different. So of these 200 copies that sent out to friends, one of them found their way into, and it's not entirely clear whether it was Cary Grant received it or Cary Grant's producer, David Hempstead. But it was originally snapped up as a potential project for Cary Grant. And so David Hempstead spent quite a lot of money developing it, turning it into a script. Eventually, Cary Grant lost interest, and the idea was sold to Frank Capra for supposedly $50,000. Frank Capra then, Italian-born American film director. Yeah. Previously directed It Happened One Night, Mr. Deeds Goes to Town, a whole bunch of movies. His career was very slightly on the wane at this point, and he picked the story up to try and kind of revive his fortunes. And then it was worked on by a whole bunch of writers. Yeah. So Albert Hackett and Francis Goodrich, who are a husband and wife team, they wrote Father of the Bride and Seven Brides for Seven Brothers. They worked on the story with Capra. They ended up getting a writer credit, but also it was co-written by Joe Swirling, who wrote Pennies from Heaven, and he wrote Guys and Dolls, the book for that as well. He does get an additional scenes or additional story credit, something like that. Also, there was contributions by Michael Wilson, who later wrote Bridge on the River Kwai and Lawrence of Arabia. And apparently there was some polish by Dorothy Parker, who I never knew, actually. Dorothy Parker apparently wrote the script for A Star is Born.
Really? Oh, wow. The original, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. A whole bunch of people had their fingers in this pie. Yeah. If you read the interviews online, apparently it was a very unpleasant development period. Capra apparently had different teams of writers working against each other. Yeah. He wasn't telling people that somebody else is also working on the script, and then he would cherry pick some bits of that and then ditch somebody else's script. And apparently Joe Swirling never spoke to Frank Capra again after being kicked off this project. So it was all a bit tricky.
Yeah, I was gonna say that I think when he bought the rights, there were already 2 or 3 drafts as well. So he had
one by Clifford Odets.
Yeah, Clifford Odets was in on there too. Yeah, so I mean, he had all these drafts, and then he ends up getting even more and more help. And normally, when I see a lot of writers on a project, I think, oh God, you just know immediately it's probably not going to be very good. But it's in one of the interviews I saw, it looked like Capra was really picking and choosing some of the best stuff from each of these great writers, and eventually, it sounds like he sort of gets kind of the biggest writing credit by the end. And he manages to take that chaos and turn it into a classic.
It is largely cohesive, isn't it? Despite having so many people contributing to the script, it does largely feel like a single unified project. So the story of the film, if you haven't seen it 20 times, it's a black and white film, heartwarming family drama, opens with a conversation between the stars, literally the stars, not the film stars, but the constellations up in the sky. Yep. So this is like a early special effects version of Voices from Heaven. God and the angels are looking down on Earth, and they select Clarence, a new angel who doesn't have his wings yet, to go down to Earth to help George Bailey, who is the character played by James Stewart, because tonight he's really going to need some help from the heavens.
Yeah, and I was going to say, just let's be clear that these angels talking are tiny little light bulbs being turned on and off to the cadence of their dialogue. It is low tech. It's early special effects, but it's not the kind of thing where if you see that as the first thing, you're probably not going to watch the movie just because it's 80 years old now. But
and also, it's like a 2 or 3 minute scene, isn't it? Yeah. These lights just kind of flickering on and off as well. It's not like it's not 10 seconds. Yeah, it's a long bit of it's a little radio plane set in heaven with no visuals accompanying it. So Clarence has the homework of, or has the task of going down to help George Bailey. But before he has to do his homework, which is actually the larger part of the whole movie, which is that he has to review the whole of George Bailey's life before he goes down to help him. So the first 2/3 of the film are like a little précis of James Stewart's life. As a young boy, he saves his brother from drowning. He works in a drugstore, and he saves Mr. Gower, who's the pharmacist, from poisoning a prescription. And as he becomes like a teenager and then an adult, his plan is to go to college and tour the world. But every time he tries to leave the small town Bedford Falls where he lives, he's always kind of thwarted. His dad runs a local buildings and loans bank, and then just as George is about to leave town, his father dies suddenly, and he ends up having to take over the bank. He marries a local girl, Mary, works in the bank for many years. He saves the bank from a bank run. He's constantly harassed by a local landowner, Henry Potter, who's like the local bad guy who is squeezing his tenants of rent with slum housing, while George is providing loans for people to build their own homes. And then eventually, after all the ups and downs of his young life, he's established in the bank. The bank inspector, or the bank examiner, arrives like on Christmas Eve to inspect the books. And George's Uncle Billy, who's an absent-minded old codger, accidentally loses $8,000 because he's tucked it into a newspaper, which he ends up accidentally giving to Henry Potter on the day of the bank examiner. He has no idea where this $8,000 is. I did a little calculation, actually, using the inflation calculator, and that's almost exactly $250,000 today.
Yeah, okay.
So this is an enormous sum of cash that he has lost, and he has no idea where it is. And for George, this is a disaster. This is going to send the bank under. It's probably going to send him to prison. Because it's going to look like someone has embezzled it, and it's probably going to be George who takes the blame. So things are looking really bad. The only hope that he has to hang on to is that he has an insurance policy, a life insurance policy for $15,000. So his desperate plan is to throw himself off a bridge, commit suicide, and that way his wife can get the insurance money, save the bank and all the loans on the homeowners that he's backing. And it's only now, about 2/3 of the way through the film, that George, about to throw himself off the bridge, meets Clarence. So Clarence the angel throws himself off a bridge, forcing George to jump in after him and rescue him. And Clarence tells him, "Well, I know you're in a terrible state. I've come to show you that really you should be grateful because your life is great and you shouldn't throw it away." And George says in this kind of passing moment, he says, "Oh, I wish I'd never been born." And so Clarence focuses on that and says, "Well, I'll tell you what, I can show you what would have happened if you never had been born." So the final third of the movie is George exploring this parallel universe version of Bedford Falls, where the whole town has gone to pot because he was never born. So it means that his wife Mary is now a spinster. She never got married. His brother, who went on to be a war hero, is dead because he never got rescued from drowning. Mr. Gower, the pharmacist, went to jail and he's an outcast because he did end up poisoning somebody with a prescription. And the whole town is just degenerate because it's all run by Henry Potter, and the whole place has gone to it's gone to seed. It's I mean, I love the portrayal of the bad, the evil Bedford Falls. It really reminds me of Back to the Future Part 2, which clearly borrows very heavily from this film.
Yeah, it's Pottersville. Pottersville.
Yeah, exactly. Pottersville. It's full of
sin.
It's full of music venues and
dance halls,
girly shows. and my favourite is when James Stewart, when George is like finally despairing of how terrible Pottersville is, you can see there's a sign behind him for a store which says musical instruments of all kinds. I do love the idea that your town is written as a hit rock bottom when you can buy a banjo in a store there. Oh my God, how bad can things get? So George realizes, maybe life isn't so bad then. Maybe I should be grateful and I should be glad that I'm alive. Clarence magics him back to the original dimension that he came from, and he has a tearful reunion with his family. And when he gets back home, he discovers that everyone in the town has pulled together to find the money that George lost from the bank. So they've all reached down the back of the sofa and emptied out their purses and the boxes under the bed. And they've all come with little scrumpled up notes and coins. And they throw it into this big basket. And the town is going to come back together to save George. And the final kiss-off is this simple notion that no man is a failure who has friends. That's what Clarence has written in a little dedication of a book that he gives to George before he disappears forever. And you're left with this this heartwarming notion of community and belonging, of community triumphing over selfishness, and this sort of happy Christmas scene where everyone sings, and it's this very uplifting final moment. My children complained bitterly that this wasn't nearly enough of a Christmas film because not enough of the scenes happened at Christmas. And I did feel at the end that I can see why it gets weird out at Christmas, and the last bit of the film does happen at Christmas, but for the first half of the film they were slightly nonplussed about why it was a Christmas film at all. Does it feel Christmassy to you, or do you think that's just an easy bit of packaging?
Humbug. I'm not a big Christmas fan. It has just the right amount of Christmas, and it's the climax is all Christmas. All the bad stuff and all the great stuff happens on Christmas Eve. So I think it is a Christmas film, and I think it's just enough Christmas. I'm going to disagree with your children.
Yeah, they don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah, but no, they've got a good point because you're seeing his whole life. There's plenty of stuff that happens as people are graduating from high school, their weddings and graduations and things like that. It's got all those scenes, and you've got this guy who's just stuck in town. And we have this expression like every day is Christmas, and honestly, every day is not Christmas, especially if you're stuck in the small town where you were born and grew up and were trying to get out of. So I think what it does is it sort of makes Christmas great, I think, in a sense. Like it's that one special day, and it boils down his whole life, and there's a lot of great stuff that happens in it that he doesn't recognize as being great. But then he's got this chance to see his life or see his town without him. And then I think that makes Christmas extra special. So I'm going to say it's just the right amount of Christmas, and I think all the important stuff happens around community getting together at that time of year. So I think it's not commercial. It's not about people buying each other presents all the time or having fantastic relationships that happen because they accidentally ended up at each other's house for Christmas or anything like that. It's just the right amount of Christmas where he finally gets his best day of life, and it's on Christmas Day or Christmas Eve.
I mean, it is all about kind of community, isn't it, and collectivism. It's nice to see collectivism on screen, given that, the underlying theme of Western cinema for the last 40 years has been about self-determination and self-realization.
Yeah.
But this is a film which was made, just bouncing out of the Second World War. So the Second World War had just happened, and there was still like a mood of, sacrifice and the greater good.
Yep.
And the opposite of selfishness, the defeat of selfishness through community. There are some real kind of emotional extremes in this film.
Yep.
I mean, there's some proper, real joyful scenes. There's an early scene where George meets Mary, who he marries, who's Donna Reed, who we saw earlier in the year in They Were Expendable, wasn't she?
We did, yes.
So she's a great screen presence.
Yeah.
And there's this joyous scene. They go to a dance together, and the early part of the scene, everybody is crammed into this tiny space. Cause, the film is shot in like 1.33 to 1. It's like this little Academy ratio box-shaped screen. Yeah. And all the characters are like squeezed into this screen so they can all get their faces on screen at once, and everybody's jostling around. And it's only later that the camera pulls back and you see all these young people dancing on this kind of dancing competition. And then you have the gag that they're dancing on a dance floor which is suspended mechanically over a swimming pool. And the jealous boy who wishes he was dancing with Mary presses the button to open up the swimming pool, and everybody gradually falls in one by one. It's it's a great gag, lots of fun. It's a real high. And in the same way that the scene shortly before George deciding to take his own life, it's uncomfortably long and very traumatizing. It's like him losing his temper with his family, getting cross at the kids, utterly desperate. He's on the verge of tears. Everything is terrible. They're not afraid of having these real proper emotional extremes.
Yep.
And I think one of the reasons it works so well is because it's James Stewart, who can do all these things credibly and approachably, and you warm to him either way. I think this film absolutely lives and dies on its leads, and James Stewart and Donna Reed, just so watchable. Yeah. So fantastic.
The casting throughout, and I think Capra says that too. There's this old, I suppose, myth that casting is everything, but I think it's true, proven by this film. I mean, the casting is so good throughout all the parts, not just the leads, but all the supporting actors are fantastic. And I think when you've got that and a decent script, it just really brings it to life and makes it a great film. So I agree with you on Jimmy Stewart. And there's a lot of great filmmaking in this too that I think is overlooked because people think of this as sort of a corny Christmas movie. So it's not, I don't think it gets its due recognition in terms of just being a great film. And I want to go to that scene where you were talking about in the gymnasium. There's this wonderful bit where the camera just sort of sits still at first, where I think they're getting drinks at the table, and it's interesting to see all these different people come into the camera. So the camera does not move; it's set, but you're introduced to a bunch of other characters. They're all sort of dressed up in tuxes for this event, and people are coming in and out of that scene, and it's crowded. It's a really interesting use of the camera because there are like 5 or 6 people at one time just in this one frame jammed in, and then it sets up the next scene because you see Donna Reed. It's Donna Reed's Mary's older brother comes over. He's going to introduce or reintroduce George to Mary, and after seeing all these tight scenes, all of a sudden you see Donna Reed from a distance, and then you see her close up because she and George, played by James Stewart, recognize each other, and it's a great setup of going from this really crowded, intimate moment to this sort of wider scene where you see them far apart, and then they end up getting closer, and they start dancing in that great dance scene afterwards. So there's a lot of filmmaking that mixes these like quiet moments and close-ups. A lot of the film is done in close-ups, and there's a lot of camera closeness. And I think it's you see the acting, and you've got great actors, and they're doing their parts really well. So it's just great filmmaking in that way. I've seen it once in color, and it was terrible.
Oh,
wow! It ruined it. It had been colorized, and I saw it once, and it did not feel the same at all. And that's kind of a turnoff for a lot of people because some people just don't want to see black and white films anymore. But so for some reasons, this is sort of seen as kind of I think just Capricorn. A lot of his films are very optimistic and like intentionally uplifting. But I think as a result, it's overlooked as being just a really well-made film.
Yeah. Talking of character actors, I've got to mention Lionel Barrymore, who plays Potter.
Oh, yeah.
As I was watching his scenes, I just kept thinking of Elon Musk, actually.
Yeah.
Incredibly wealthy man who's using his wealth to bully all those around him. This film feels more relevant now than in 1946.
Yeah, thank you.
We have not moved on.
Yeah, thank you so much for saying that because, again, I've seen this film so many times, but I got to see it. I haven't seen it in probably 3 or 4 years. And I saw it with totally new eyes in light of like the housing crises and the banking crises happening in this country. And the politics of this film really stood out for me this time around because Lionel Barrymore is just, it's just the politics of wealthy landowners and a business class just trying to take over or eliminate this building and loan company. So it's really the big man just trying to gobble it up. And at one point, when he's talking to George Bailey, Potter, played by Lionel Barrymore, he says the quiet parts out loud where he just wants to kill them. He's on the board of the bank and loan, but he wants to kill it or at least just control it. And he says it straight up. And I mean, the politics of this film it's FDR era, it's, and you're absolutely right to talk about, the collective versus the individual. And one thing I really love about this film that occurred to me or reoccurred to me again, was just this idea of a strong individual. You've got strong individuals like George Bailey, but working in this collectivist environment, and that it's just such an excellent theme from the New Deal era, from the Franklin Delano Roosevelt era. And I never thought of this really as such an overtly political film, but because of what I'm seeing in the world right now, and I hadn't seen it in a few years, I just saw it with totally new eyes, and I loved it even more this time. And I think you're right about a lot of the emotions. Like, this is a film where I'm definitely crying a bunch, I'm laughing a bunch, and then I'm laughing and crying a bunch, and sometimes I'm seething with leftist anger as well. It's just a film it does pack a lot of emotional punch, and I think that's why it is a classic. I think that's why people love it so much, because it makes you feel things.
I do have this slight question. I think, I think Clarence the Angel, the way he approaches his problem, and it's just the same in the short story. He's presented with this problem, which is that George wants to end his life, and the problem that he tries to solve is not the problem that he's been presented. So if the story was going to make any sense, Clarence would show George what the town would look like after he died, and he'd take him to kind of 5 years in the future and say, "Oh, well, look, that." The whole town's gone to pot now because you're not here. Your family's unhappy because you're not here. But instead, he solves completely the wrong problem, which is he says, "Well, what if you'd never existed?"
Yeah.
And if the fact that George were to take his own life, that would not undo all the good deeds that he'd done up until that moment.
That's right.
So it's so that kind of I can understand why it's much more fun.
Yeah.
To do the problem this way around and to see, well, what would have happened if you'd never been born. But he's not actually solving the problem that George presents him.
I think as a result, though, you get more. First of all, it's a film that does need some darkness. So it's nice that the darkness gets introduced, I think. And then I think we need to see the problems in order to really appreciate, I think, the goodness. And I think that if you do it the other way around, I don't think you would see that as clearly. It certainly wouldn't be as dramatic, I guess. You need that tension, that darkness in order for it to be dramatic, because I don't know that it would work the same way.
I don't think it would. I agree.
But I mean, I just love this film, and I love everything about it more and more each time I see it. Like, there are some small problems that I'd love to talk about, but I overlook so much. I don't mind the Capricorn thing, and I'm seeing it this time right after we saw Kess a couple weeks ago.
Right.
These are two directors, at least in this film. They're sort of going after these collectivist themes and these, there's the social realism of Loach, and it's very gritty and soothsayer-like. And then I think Capricorn is very, he's so optimistic, and they're getting at the same ideas, but from really, really different angles. And this is, as you said, this is one of Capra's later films. And he's kind of, he had sort of a hard run, I suppose, but this is sort of him at probably the height of his powers. And he's making just a fantastic film with a really, really strong message. So I did have these sort of flashes of Ken Loach's work as well, which seems really ironic because they're such different filmmakers, but they're trying to communicate the same thing. And I think Capra does get some of that darkness in there that Loach gets in his films, and I think that's really important. But he ends up on such a brighter moment. Another thing that I like about that way of doing the film is the actors. There are a lot of great actors who get to play complete opposites of themselves in the film. Like when you think of Nick, the bartender who gets to play George's friend and really Mr. Nice Guy, and then he gets to play like a very sort of goonish, almost caricature Italian bartender sort of thing, or Dr. Gower or Mr. Gower, who without George's intervention would have ended up in prison and drunk. And that's an actor who had played Jesus Christ just a few years earlier, and here he was playing this drunken, unlicensed or banished pharmacist. And I've got a medical question for you. At one point, when he tests the poison, he just puts his finger in it and then tastes it. That doesn't seem like a great way to test.
Yeah, no, that's the way they always get us to test poison in medicine. Yeah, absolutely. It's a standard method.
Or Mary playing this spinster librarian. I mean, you get these actors. You're giving them a chance to play a completely different character because George hadn't had his influence on them in their lives, and I think that's a really nice touch.
I do wonder how one might feel watching this film as a person of colour these days. There are only two characters of colour in the film.
Yeah.
There is Annie the maid, who is she who is kind of sassy black maid character type A.
Yeah.
And then the only other black character who appears is a pianist at a kind of degenerate bar in Pottersville.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it is very much. It's a pretty. It's a white bread film about white people.
Very much.
And
yeah.
it was a film made for a white audience in 1946. So I guess I should temper my expectations
of the times. Yeah. Well, there's the Martini, Mr. Martini. Also, there's a stereotype there we could call the cliche squad. If you're he's got tons of kids. They've got the heavy accent. There's a goat in the backseat of the car when they're moving. I mean, it's over the top. So that's one of the faults. But there's just so much great stuff that I can't fault them too much on that. It's this film is now 80 years old or something like that, or going on 80 years old. So it's definitely an old film. But again, its ideas are increasingly current, I guess, or increasingly relevant. Which
is shocking and depressing, isn't it?
Yeah. There's this one moment where George is on I think he's on the bridge, or is he? He might be in the bar, and he says, "I'm not a praying man." I love that. Like it's this free thinker. I mean, because obviously, I think the United States was an even more religious place back then. So for him to say something like that, it sort of brings up this whole question of free thinking and independence, and whether or not we have power over our own lives and whatnot. And there's some intense moments. He is, considering suicide at that moment, and it's dealt with really, really quite well, I think. There are a couple of. I'll go right to my biggest problem with this film, and I think most of my family agrees. And it's I'm going to preface it by talking about Persian rug makers,
of course,
if you don't mind. It's that. The Persian rug makers, allegedly they leave one mistake in the rug that they're creating because it would be an offense to Allah if you try to create something perfect, because only He can do that, and perfection doesn't exist. So the last line, you've already talked about it a little bit. Miraculously, this book, it's Tom. Oh God. Not Huckleberry Finn, it's the other one. Tom
Sawyer.
Tom Sawyer. I think Clarence is reading Tom Sawyer, and he's written a dedication in the front of the book, and it ends up in this pile of money that all the people have been contributing to save George. It gets in there miraculously. We don't see Clarence in that scene. And then he's written, his inscription is, remember, no man is a failure who has friends. And I've always hated the wording of that, because it really should be, remember, no man who has friends is a failure. You can be a failure who has friends. But you can't, no man who has a lot of friends could be a failure. So it's just this really weird mistake to me. And I wonder if you feel the same way, or if if I'm obsessing on it, and I think the reason I'm obsessing on it is because it's such a perfect film otherwise. It's so great. And then this last thing, you could watch this film with my family and everyone just goes, ugh, at the end, because you've had this cathartic experience, and then you just see what looks like kind of just, if not bad grammar, it is unacceptable. It's just, it's imprecise, I guess. How's your feeling on that?
Or maybe it was Yoda that they got to write the dedication. So I'm just going to check here. So it's the word order and not the sentiment that you object to.
Precisely.
Here.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
is that nitpicking?
Well, I see. It strikes me as it's nice to end on the word friends.
I guess. Okay.
And I'm sure that's what the intention was, wasn't it? And
Okay.
if you end up with this kind of slightly cheesy, like pseudo-German word order, then maybe people are prepared to accept that. I must say, if that's your biggest complaint, God damn, this film is perfect, very nearly then, isn't it? That's 99.9%.
Yeah, I think it is a masterpiece. I think there's some, in terms of filmmaking or editing, there's some jarring scenes, and we talked about this when we talked about They Were Expendable, where they go from a fairly wide angle to just a less wide angle, and it just jogs my thinking because it's not cut perfectly. I don't know if you've noticed these sorts of moments. It's the moment where, in particular, where Uncle Billy is taunting Potter, and he goes to give him the newspaper that has the $8,000 in it. And I guess to show clearly that the newspaper goes to Potter, he goes from a fairly wide angle to something that's just not close enough in my mind. It's kind of one of those mid-range angles, and as a result, you see the imprecision of the actor's movements, and it's just it's very common. We saw it a bunch in the John Ford film, and I think it's just in this day and age we generally go from we don't have too many wide angles that go to something less wide. It's usually something sort of a medium angle, and then you get into your close-ups pretty straight away, and it's just a different era of filmmaking. But I think as a result, and a different era of editing too. I think it's this combination that makes a handful of moments in the film just are a little inelegant in their transitions as a result.
Apparently, it was a 90-day shoot. So they did. Is it 2 hours, 11 minutes, something like that? And they got the whole thing in 90 days. I think they worked, hard and efficiently on this. Yeah. Interestingly, you talk about use of the camera. I think there was one moment that slightly stood out for me, which is I think he crosses the line at one point when I think it's the scene where the jilted boyfriend is considering whether or not he might open up the floor. To spill everybody into the swimming pool of the dance, and I think there's him and his buddy are speaking, and the boy, the jilted boy is on the right and the friend is on the left, and then at the very next shot, because the camera is now behind them so that they can look at the button. That will open up the door. Now suddenly the jilted boyfriend is on the left and the friend is on the right.
Yeah,
and things those little things. I mean, you still see that in films today, and that kind of crossing the line. It just jolts me a little bit, but I'm not sure I ever would have noticed that before I started reading about kind of film.
That sort of technique. Yeah, I see it all the time in film now. I think it was very rare. In fact, we were instructed against doing it.
Absolutely, exactly. I think it's bad practice, isn't it, crossing the line? But you see it not uncommonly.
Yeah, but again, yes,
but we're nitpicking gits, aren't we?
Yeah,
then?
well, again, it's like you're looking in some ways when there's a Persian rug maker, you start looking at your rugs very carefully, right? You're looking for that one mistake because it's there. But otherwise, it's really just one of my favorite films, and I'm glad that it's not too Christmassy because I can watch it anytime. I mean, that's the thing about it. For me, it's just a great story, and it's a really well put together film, and I have very little negative to say about it. So
I've been trying to kind of do the synthesis to bring the two films together, and it's this is a tricky one. This is a very long rope that you have to pull on to draw these two films into the same plot. I mean, effectively. I suppose they both share this notion that Christmas is about family.
Yep.
Or this notion kind of sort of that you should be grateful for what you have, or at least that there's kind of something about honesty and coming clean and, trust and faith, I suppose, are kind of are both themes for these films. I think the thing that makes that rope really hard to pull on to draw these films together is that it's the question of stakes. I think in It's a Wonderful Life there are such real stakes. There's, like you said, there's a kind of real darkness. It's proper life or death.
Yeah.
And even the scenes which are not about life and death, it's still about your livelihood, your home, putting a roof over your head, looking after your family. Really, big important things.
Yeah.
Whereas Your Christmas or Mine, I'm struggling to think really what the stakes are. It feels like the stakes are extremely low and what's at risk is very small. And they do attempt to shed a little bit of darkness amongst the light, even in Your Christmas or Mine, because there's the speech that Haley's dad gives about, I miss my dead mum,
Yeah.
And sometimes think about her. And they're really trying to stitch that into the fabric of the film, but it just won't fit.
Yeah.
And it sort of feels a little bit like lip service. Whereas for It's a Wonderful Life, that darkness is present throughout the whole film.
Yeah.
Death stalks this film, doesn't it? Which is why it's so effective as an uplifting joy at the end. So they are covering a little bit of the same ground.
Yeah, I'm gonna go surprisingly high, and I think following your lead, I like what you said about class being more divisive than race, and I think that's kind of it's definitely in It's in Wonderful Life, and I think it's definitely in a little bit, as you said. And maybe they didn't do it well enough or not enough, or maybe they didn't want to draw much attention to it. But there's something really lovely. It's pluralistic. What is it called? Your Christmas or Mine. It's a bit more pluralistic, way more than It's a Wonderful Life ultimately. But It's a Wonderful Life is definitely working on this class level that is, I think, again, more relevant today than it ever was. And as you said, there are very few minorities or people of color in It's a Wonderful Life, but it really hammers on the class. Whereas there's more representation, I think, in Your Christmas or Mine, and it maybe doesn't talk so much about class, but I think it's in there. So they kind of complement each other in that way, I think, and maybe probably unintentionally on the Your Christmas or Mine level, but they do. I think filmmakers are intentionally trying to bring more cultures into the same film and put all walks of life in the same film. So I think that has to be intentional on one level.
And it's certainly it's impossible and unthinkable that the makers of Your Christmas or Mine have not seen It's a Wonderful Life.
Absolutely impossible. Yeah.
So it's impossible that it will not have influenced that film.
Yeah.
Okay. Good.
I had in the bonus features. I saw this on DVD, and you don't get bonus features anymore. But it was so
remember them.
So lovely. I saw a 60th.
I miss those bonus features.
Yeah, and I saw a 60th anniversary version of It's a Wonderful Life on DVD. It does strike me that we're deeper into the information age now, and we have less information in our DVD in our films, I guess. But I did learn that one reason that It's a Wonderful Life became huge, it did not open well. It was not an instant classic by any means, but its copyright had expired, I guess, in 1975, fairly early on in 75. So, but it had a 30-year run or something like that. And then as a result, because it was available, it flooded television everywhere. So it became this television hit. And I love that because it's more accessible. It's like serving the collective and not focused on money as a result. It's making change in society, but not making money. So that was interesting to me.
The film really took off when it was for everyone.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, we have just enough time to talk about what else is playing at this theatre. Yeah, do you want to go first? What else have you seen anything good lately?
I have. I don't think I've been to the theater though, but I've seen two films and their connection. If I did a miniature two-reel cinema club, their connection was Jesse Plemons in small roles.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, wait a second. Let's see. Can I guess?
Oh, yeah, please.
Oh.
One was a recommendation right from your world. It actually came to me two places. My brother recommended this film, and then you recommended, I think, in the last, or maybe it's 2 or 3 pods ago.
Oh, God, the only cameo I can think of from him now at the moment is that terrible rock movie, Jungle Cruise, and I can't imagine you watched that recently. What are the films?
No. I watched American Made, which you had just seen.
Oh, yeah.
Tom Cruise film. He has a very small part in that. I mean, it's funny, though, because it's not that old. American Made is, I think, 2017 or something like that.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Really enjoyed that film. And Jesse Plemons has already been in some films by that point, and then Breaking Bad had a recurring role in there. And then we also saw a film by Paul Thomas Anderson called... I think it's just called The Master, which is a few years earlier, 2012. He plays Philip Seymour Hoffman's son in that film.
God, I'd forgotten he was in that.
Yeah, very well. Again, not a massive role. He's got some dialogue, but two films that featured a little bit Jesse Plemons. So those are the two that I've seen recently. I didn't get out to the theater. There's some stuff, and I know that for our next pod, I'll be going to the theater, but we'll talk about that after you talk about what's playing in your home theater.
Well, we actually did go to the theatre the other night. We went to see Sleeping Beauty, the ballet at Sadler's Wells. This is yesterday. The Matthew Bourne production. It's a kind of a gothic version of Sleeping Beauty, which is absolutely fantastic. Nice. 5 stars. Absolutely incredible. Fantastic. Oh, the tickets we originally bought, I think we bought them first week in January in 2020.
Yeah.
Oh. And then the show was cancelled at the end of 2020. Yeah. And then they rebooked us for 2021, and then there was another COVID spike in 2021, so we didn't go. And at last, so we've been waiting for almost 3 years to go and see this. So that was great. That was fantastic. Yeah. The only other movie we've seen recently, we watched Hot Rod, which is the first Lonely Island feature film. Andy Samberg plays a kind of Evel Knievel wannabe. And had the desired effect, because it did make us guffaw with laughter a few times. But it's one of those films where the funniest thing about it is somebody falling over and hurting themselves. And Andy Samberg falls over a lot and hurts himself really badly many times. So that was why I guffawed out there.
The people in my family would love that. They love that kind of comedy. I'm glad you got to see Sleeping Beauty. It's a fantastic score. I love that music. And then when our listeners know Ines Braga, who when I was arranging to do the pod, have her on the pod, she made it a point to FaceTime me from in front of Sadler's Wells, because we used to go there a lot to see a dance together. So we've got a connection straight from the pod to Sadler's Wells and your experience there. So I miss that place. I saw so much good stuff there. You're a lucky man.
Yeah, we are. We're very lucky that it's just the other end of the tube line to us. So, you hinted a moment ago.
Ooh, I did.
That you have a plan for what we might watch next.
Yeah, I think we're going to go blue. Go big blue.
Sorry, is this the Israeli porn thing again?
We're going to watch Avatar, the newest James Cameron film, I believe. And we're going to couple that with some older James Cameron. We were both surprised to find that The Abyss was released in 1989. So those are 33 years apart. We'll see what James Cameron has done in that time. We'll see if his filmmaking technique has changed at all, and if he's created any new technologies to make his stories that come across any differently. So we'll be looking forward to that, but it will be a couple of weeks down the line. Do you want to explain the next couple of weeks to us?
Yeah, so next week we're going to be talking about Christmas movies when we go to the popcorn counter, and then the week after that, very exciting, Oscar season comes around, and we'll be presenting the new and exclusive, much talked about, Two Real Cinema Club Film of the Year.
Ooh.
I'm assuming that's the noise you make of anticipation. It wasn't you rested your hand on the radiator there or something like that, and it was very hot.
Building excitement. Trying to put a little sound out there to build excitement.
So this has been this week's Two Real Cinema Club. We will see you for Christmas movies next week. Until then, thanks for listening. We'll see you then.
And happy holidays.